Madden is one of the longest running sports video game series, and over those 30 plus years, the series has produced some of the best and worst sports games ever. Over the past 2 decades, Madden has gone from one of the most loved and praised sports series to one of the most hated, and from what I've seen online, there appears to be 2 extremes when it comes to how people see this series nowadays. One side just wholeheartedly simps for the newer games, while the other side just takes an endless dump on them. I want to say out front that I exist somewhere in the middle. If you clicked on this video expecting me to do nothing but complain about the games or suck off EA, well, you're not going to get it. Don't worry though, there's going to be plenty of complaining and ranting later on, but that's not the point of this video. The goal of this video is to give perspective on why a game like Madden 21, for example, was relentlessly hated when it came out. I'm also trying to give perspective to Madden players who just haven't been playing the series as long as I have, and simply do not understand what they missed out on from those earlier games. I've been playing Madden games since their glory days, and witnessed their decline over the years and would like to see the new games equal or even surpass the quality of the games I grew up with. So in this video, I'm going to go over the 20 years of Madden games I've played, and together we're going to see where this once beloved series went all wrong and what steps EA can take to make it better. This is a Madden NFL Series Retrospective. As a kid, I was introduced to many of the video game series I still play to this day. But before I ever came across games like Pokemon, Call of Duty, or any other popular series you can think of, there was Madden. It's a simple story, really. I was around 4 years old and was shopping around a store with my parents. I can't really remember which store it was, but I found myself in the games aisle and nothing really stood out to me until I saw a game with one of my favorite football players on its cover, Marshall Faulk. I obviously knew nothing about games at such a young age. The only games I played up till that point were those old Jumpstart games, you know, the educational ones on the computer, or I was watching my dad play a game on the old NES console my parents owned. I knew nothing about Madden. The only reason I wanted the game at all was because I saw the running back of my favorite team on the cover. It was really that simple. I imagine many people who've played sports games over the years experienced something similar. They saw one of their favorite athletes on the cover, and got the game without knowing anything other than my favorite player is on the cover and it's a sports game. Madden 03 marks the 14th release since the series started and builds upon the many improvements that had been made up to that point. It has all the essential game modes and features one would expect in a licensed NFL game. A few gameplay improvements were added. Madden 03 features faster gameplay, standstill catches, defensive strafing, and a new in-game replay system. Another big addition was online gameplay for the PS2 version, but I'm recording with the GameCube version, so you won't see it. The main game modes are Play Now and Franchise. The other game modes include Tournament, a mode where you can set up various kinds of brackets to run quick tournaments, 2-minute Drill, a mode where you can get 2 minutes to drive down the field and get as many yards and points as possible, Football 101, a tutorial mode where the late John Madden breaks down various plays and formations, and Situation Mode, a mode where you can set up any in-game situation. You can set the score, time, spot of the ball, and the amount of timeouts left, just to name a few of the choices. The newest mode and main addition to Madden 03 is the Minicamp mode. Minicamp takes players to training camp with a handful of simple drills that teach players about different mechanics in the game in a more relaxed and fun way than just playing 11 on 11 games. For example, the ground attack drill allows players to get accustomed to the running controls, while precision passing teaches players how to hit certain passing windows. Madden 03 also allows you to create your own playbooks, teams, and players. Create a Playbook allows players to create a playbook from scratch. You're able to add up to 81 plays across 11 different formations. You can also create your own formations and plays. In Create a Team, you can create new uniforms, logos, and stadiums. You can choose from a lot of different logos, many of which stand out and have a unique look to them. The stadium options are limited to 5 and lack any customization beyond selecting logos that appear on the field. The uniform editor, on the other hand, is great. There are plenty of styles and colors, so you can make pretty interesting uniforms if you're willing to spend the time. create a player is pretty straightforward. You customize the appearance and attributes of a new player and add that player to any team of your choice. The last feature of Madden 03 are Madden cards. You can open card packs with points you earn by playing the game and get cards with a variety of features. Some cards unlock historic teams or unique players to the free agent pool, like Andrew WK. Other cards function as earnable cheats, where you can play cards for temporary ratings boosts in a game, or you can play cheat cards. One example of a cheat card is one that earns your team points for every injury that occurs during the game, with the more severe injuries earning you more points. The main mode of Madden 03 is Franchise, obviously. Franchise in 03 is simple compared to some later Maddens. You start in preseason and progress through the end of the regular season and postseason if you make it. During the season, you can re-sign players, make trades, sign free agents, adjust your game plan and play call tendencies, and track stats and weekly awards. After the season, you can play in the Pro Bowl, view retired players, scout rookies, re-sign players, sign free agents, and draft new players. The reason I've gone through all these modes and features is to establish a baseline of sorts to compare later games to. I believe 03 is a good game to base expectations off of. While it doesn't have a ton of depth to its gameplay, modes, or other features, it serves as a good foundation for later Madden games. It should be expected that the Maddens which succeed 03 should build upon what already exists. If a game from here on out doesn't build upon the foundations laid out by older games, I would consider it to be a disappointment at best. Madden 04 is one of the most legendary Madden games ever, and you need look no farther than the cover of the game. In all of video games, there exists a pantheon of absolutely broken characters. Meta Knight in Super Smash Bros. Brawl and Bayonetta in Smash 4 are good examples I can name off the top of my head. Despite being a simulation sports game, Madden is not immune from completely broken players altering the entire meta of the game. One of the most famous broken players in a football video game is Bo Jackson in Tecmo Bowl. Bo Jackson was so overpowered that he can run circles around other players with ease, as well as break several tackles on any given run. More recent examples of broken players in Madden include NFL 100 Eric Dickerson in Madden 20 and quarterback Derrick Henry in Madden 22. But among all these players, 04 Vic is by far the most well remembered. Honestly, if you ask anyone who's been playing Madden for as long as I have, what comes to mind when you think of Madden 04, it's Mike Vick. The reason Vic is so absurdly good in this game is a combination of his run speed and a new feature called Playmaker. With Playmaker, you can scramble around behind the line with Vic and change the direction of your receivers on the fly, allowing you to open running or passing lanes very quickly. Not to mention that there weren't many defensive options to stop a player like Vic. Playmaker controls also existed on defense. You could shift the secondary or change your play from a pass defense to run defense or vice versa. Owner's Mode is the big addition in Madden 04. Owner's Mode allows you to control the ticket concession, merchandise, parking, and advertising prices, bringing the business aspect of running an NFL team to the game. You can look at a variety of data tables that track fan attendance, support, and finances. Now, fan happiness, player happiness, and maintaining a balanced yearly budget mattered. If your team was playing poorly, dynamic attendance would show your stadium not being sold out. Other additions included upgrading your stadium. You can change its sponsor name or create your own. You can also pay for a variety of unique upgrades that increase its value. You can also build a brand new custom stadium. You can relocate your team, with the option to accept the city's offer for lower cost, or choose a custom relocation and move your team to one of the many cities across North America. You can now change your coaching staff and hire offensive, defensive, and special teams coordinators. Franchise also adds Training Camp, which brings over the minicamp drills. You can choose one player to run a minicamp drill to earn points that go into upgrading attributes. The trade block was also added, so now you can add players and request specific positions and overalls in return. It's functionally a trade finder. You can now see the career stats for every player and the different teams they played for. Madden 04 also features a new play call interface that allows you to call the next play while replays are occurring. You can also change the different player packages that are a part of the formations. Playbooks are now more realistic to the actual schemes NFL teams run and suit the schemes and strategies each head coach and coordinator use. Create a Team also features a new stadium builder, where you can create a custom stadium fit for your team. Madden 2004 is where the series really started to come into its own, with the much better franchise mode and various gameplay additions that would mark the beginning of a golden era for the Madden series. Madden 04 added several standout features that improved the overall experience that these kinds of games offer, but the gameplay changes only benefited the offense, leaving 04 as one of the most lopsided Maddens in terms of balance between offense and defense. So Madden 05 was to bring in many new improvements to the defensive end of the ball to rebalance the game. EA made sure to show where their focus was for 05 with the game's trailer. The very first shot is that of Ray Lewis sacking Mike Vick, demonstrating that this year was all about defense. Madden 05 holds a special place in my heart because it was the first Madden I actually played on the GameCube. I fell in love with this game and probably spent nearly 500 hours in total on just this game over the years. Madden 05 added Rushing Attack. This is a side mode that combines the ground attack and chase and tackle drills from minicamp into a head-to-head game mode. Each player gets 1 minute on each side of the ball to get the highest score. Points are earned by getting yards and TDs on offense, while defense gets points by making hit-stick tackles. 2 Minute Drill gets an update as well. Now you need to play both offense and defense for 2 minutes with the goal to get a high score. You get points on defense by getting sacks, turnovers, tackles for loss, and pass deflections. Madden 05 adds many memorable features, the most recognizable change being the addition of the hit stick. Now you can use the right stick to lay out a massive hit on the ball carrier, increasing the likelihood of knocking the ball loose and recovering a fumble. The hit stick is such a good addition that it is in every single Madden going forward. Another key gameplay change was the addition of defensive hot routes. Now you can quickly change coverage assignments or blitzes prior to the snap. Now you can make proper adjustments to counter any shifts or motion plays being run by the offense. Create a Fan allowed players to create a custom fan that they would see in the stands over the course of a game. For franchise, Madden 05 introduced some fan favorite features. The Tony Bruno Show, a radio show that talked about various storylines across the league while you navigated menus in franchise mode.
Last night I met up with some old buddies of mine from back home, and it was a good time. We hadn't seen those guys in a while. But anyways, we got talking to sports, and we debated over who's underrated and who's overrated in the NFL. We all had our clash of opinions, of course, but then, as soon as one of them mentioned a guy having a poor combine, it made me think, the NFL combine is more overrated than any player out there. I mean, it's got to be the most overrated event in sports. It's an evaluation process that's just completely blown out of proportion. And there's way too much weight put on the results. And if you disagree, then call it any time because I'd love to hear your argument. In all honesty, should a guy's stock plummet just because his 40 time wasn't what you hoped it would be? I mean, look at Anquan Bolden. He went late in the second round just because he ran a 4.740. Now, I can see if the combine hurts a guy's stock who didn't prove himself in college, but Bolden was a guy who more than proved himself in college. The man flat out dominated any corner that ever covered him. He's a football player, not a 40-yard dash sprinter, a football player. That's the difference. There's so many crucial elements that the combine can't measure. For instance, were there any drills or tests at the combine that showed Bolden's exceptional downfield blocking, his heart, his tenacity, his ability to catch the football in traffic? No. There's nothing at the combine that would have showed any of this. So when a guy doesn't blaze a 4.3, I don't want to hear about how his stock is dropping. How many times a game does a player line up in a track stance and run 40 yards straight downfield without breaking stride? I mean, seriously, folks, it's ridiculous. It's almost as if teams nitpick for weaknesses, and then they grossly exaggerate them in an attempt to scare the other teams away from drafting that player. I remember all the post-combine talk years ago about how Dante Culpepper didn't have very big hands. In the meantime, he's throwing 40-yard frozen ropes on the money at every workout. The bottom line is, if you want to find out how good somebody is, take a look at what they did on Saturdays. All right, time to get some calls.
Hey, Tony, I love your show. What can I say? You're the best guy out there on the airways right now. You question the answers, answer the questions. You're the man. However, I'm going to have to disagree with you here. I don't think the comment's overrated at all. You act like scouts are wasting their time when they measure Dante's small hands. I mean, come on. Was it any coincidence he was amongst the league leaders in fumbles his first few seasons? The size of his hands were a red flag at the combine for a very good reason. These coaches are making an investment. They need the combine to notice any previously undiscovered weaknesses. Come on, Tony, you're smart in this. Let's go.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all Dante Culpepper did was lead the NFL in touchdown passes his first year on the field. I don't care if he has big hands or small hands. He got to the Pro Bowl. That's all that matters. As far as the fumbles, hey, man, he's a playmaker. If nobody's open, he tucks it and takes off. The odds of fumbling are always going to be higher for quarterbacks who run because they get hit out there in the open field. Don't even try to attribute his fumbles to the size of his hands. The same coaches that were concerned about his hand size are the same coaches who couldn't stop him from throwing the ball 2 years later. That so-called red flag you're talking about, that didn't keep him off the cover of Madden 02, did it? I'm Tony Bruno. That'll wrap up things for this week. Thanks for tuning in for the broadcasting excellence that is the Tony Bruno Show here on EA Sports Radio.
This was a significantly better way for players to keep track of events going on throughout the NFL, since they could listen to stories about players and teams across the league while handling other matters pertaining to their team's roster or finances. 05 also added Storyline Central, which replaces the old means of getting updates across the league and formats them into local and national newspapers. Some of these newspapers are actual local and national papers, such as the New York Post and USA Today. The newspapers gave stories about position battles, contract negotiations, game predictions, and so much more. Position battles would occur over the course of the preseason, creating tension and a potential media storm when having to pick between younger or veteran players. New additions to the coaching menu included weekly game plans that would break down the strengths, weaknesses, and star players of your opponent in each week. The morale system was a huge addition to franchise. Now players had a unique morale rating that would be affected by various things like their role on the team and contract status. This morale would affect the player's willingness to re-sign with your team, and if their morale got so low, they would refuse to play and even threaten to become, quote, a distraction. Teams also had a prestige rating that affected a free agent's willingness to sign in the offseason. Teams that were run well had an advantage in signing free agents. Restricted free agency was added, and you can now franchise tag players in the offseason. Players had their own set of factors that affected their willingness to sign with your team. Overall, Madden 05 is a great game due to the new news and player morale systems added in franchise and the major upgrades in defensive gameplay. Madden 06 marks a significant shift in the football sim game market. Prior to 06, there were several competitors to Madden games, some of which included NFL 2K, NFL Game Day, NFL Blitz, and NFL Fever. All of these games competed against each other, constantly trying to one-up each other with new features and better gameplay. In 2004, NFL 2K Madden entered a pricing war, with 2K costing $20 and Madden lowering their price to $30 just to compete. After seeing all the different games dilute the market and how the lower game prices were affecting the NFL's revenue from the licensing, the NFL decided to sell its license to the highest bidder. The game company with the highest bid was EA, so EA would go on to hold the exclusive license to create NFL video games. This change marked an end of competition for Madden, and with the exclusive NFL license under EA's control, EA no longer had to worry about another NFL game taking any market share for football games. Madden 06 continued to build on the great foundation of the previous games, and added even more gameplay mechanics and new modes to expand the series' content. We'll still be looking at the GameCube, Xbox, and PS2 versions for a few more games. EA made a next-gen version of Madden 06 for the Xbox 360, but the game was rushed and is considered the worst Madden game ever. I will not be going over it in this video, but if you're curious about that game and why it ended up being so terrible, I recommend the vid that Soft Drink TV made about it. I'll link it in the description below so you can check it out later. The gameplay focus for 06 was passing, so EA introduced two new mechanics to the passing game. The first addition was the Vision Cone. The Vision Cone changed how passing worked, since now players had to not only watch their receivers in the pocket, but now they had to manage a Vision Cone that displayed where the QB was looking. You had to control the Vision Cone with the right stick so you can accurately pass where the QB was looking. Throwing outside of the cone would result in an inaccurate pass. Personally, I don't really care for it. While I can appreciate the attempt to simulate the quarterback's vision on the field, the mechanic just adds another layer to an already sufficient number of things to manage during a play. Having to look at 3 to 5 different receivers on the play, then having to look back at the pocket and make sure the O-line is holding up and doing that back and forth can already be a struggle for some players, especially on higher difficulties. It doesn't really bother me while playing offense, but I can definitely imagine a lot of people who play Madden casually would struggle with it. Not to mention you can't move at full sprint with the quarterback while managing the vision cone, since the right stick and the A button both require your right thumb to use, unless you're playing with the claw hand setup. The defense can also see the cone, so the defense knows exactly where the QB is intending to throw the ball. It was interesting, but poorly received back then, which is why it would never return in another Madden game. The other new passing mechanic was quarterback precision placement, which allowed players to lead their receivers with the pass. By holding the left stick in a certain direction during the throwing motion, you can lead the receiver in the corresponding direction on the stick. This is a much better addition as it increases the passing skill gap and allows you to sneak tight passes into your receivers by altering the ball trajectory. This mechanic still exists in Madden games to this day. The last key mechanic that was added was the truck stick. Now you can push the right stick up to perform a truck move while carrying the ball. Franchise mode received a couple of tweaks as well. Now you can look at the statistical and positional breakdowns for teams you're facing in each week. You're able to see play call rates, third down conversion rate, and red zone scoring rate. Positional breakdown provides a description of every starter on a team, keying in on their strengths and weaknesses. Weekly game plan allows you to run 3 different plays that will occur in the game. By running through these game plan plays, you give your team a boost when you encounter those defensive plays in a game. The main addition to Madden 06, however, is NFL Superstar, a brand new career mode. Superstar mode starts with you creating your player, which involves getting a random pair of parents that determine your potential as a player. From there, you fill out your player info and start your career. The first month leading up to the draft involves doing interviews, hiring an agent, and taking an IQ test. Terrell Davis serves as your mentor and will message you on your phone about various aspects of the mode. Once you get drafted, you can access a tattoo and barbershop to change your player's appearance. You can change your equipment in the mirror. You can also view your team's roster, stats, fan art, agent directory, and practice results through the computer. You can also look at your progress with earning sponsors. You can earn sponsors by meeting certain thresholds in your player's appearance, exposure, and popularity, as well as your ratings. You can get better agents as you progress through your career, getting you access to the Performance Institute, as well as getting better contracts, more exposure, more endorsements, and better interviews. Doing well in practice gives you rating boosts, and gameplay sessions giving you insight into specific plays that will be run that week. The week-to-week gameplay involves doing practices, then playing the actual games. Once the season is over, you get to compete in the Madden Bowl. You can also make appearances in movies, where you need to memorize lines in the script and choose the correct line in a short minigame. Superstar mode as a whole lays out a great foundation for a career mode in Madden games. However, it has a serious issue that prevents me from actually caring about the mode, and that is the fact that I'm controlling the whole team. When I play a career mode, I want to only control my player. Madden 06 makes great strides in improving the content of Madden games by adding a proper career mode. While some of its gameplay changes weren't received that well, 06 marked an overall improvement from 05. I won't lie, Madden 07 is my favorite Madden game, as it delivers one of the most polished, high-quality experiences that I have ever played in a sports game. First, let's look at how the gameplay has improved. Madden 07 introduces lead blocker controls. This allows you to take control of a blocker prior to the snap, so you can take control of the lineman or fullback to clear a path for the running back. Once you finish lead blocking over the course of the play, you can switch back to controlling the running back for the rest of the play. Ball carrier moves are now controlled by the right stick. You can use the right stick to control side jukes, back jukes, and trucking, while the triggers now have smaller cuts to the left and right. Players now have specific moves as well. For example, larger power backs will run over players when you attempt a truck move, while smaller, more nimble backs will duck under a defender's tackle. Madden 07 also introduced the NFL Network mode, which is essentially a reskin of the Football 101 mode from previous Maddens. Franchise mode introduces some great improvements to the offseason. Now there are free agent signing periods before and after the draft, allowing you to focus on drafting good players rather than using the draft to fill holes in your roster. Scouting has been completely overhauled. Now scouting is done by completing drills with a player you would like to scout. Earning gold in the drill will unlock that player's scouting report. Rather than selecting 15 players per scouting round like before, this new system allows you to get a feel for the players by completing drills with them. The College All-Star Game serves as a way to experience the rookie class by using them in an actual game setting. You can determine which player best suits your team's needs and how they suit your playstyle rather than simply going off a scouting report and combine numbers. It's sad that this hasn't been replicated in newer games, as I will always prefer to actually use the rookies and base who I want to draft on whether I like using them in a game, rather than solely going off letter grades or their ratings and combine numbers. Beyond changes to scouting, franchise also adds player roles. Player roles are earned by meeting certain rating thresholds and provide a boost to the player and their teammates based on their role. Roles are meant to be a way to distinguish the best players in the league. The problem is that the roles don't actually work. The other addition was Owner's Ratings in Owner's Mode, and this serves as a way to measure your performance year by year, something that was missing in the previous games. Superstar Mode received some much needed changes. Mainly were the changes to how pre-draft worked. Now you play in private workouts. This gives you an opportunity to upgrade your ratings while getting to show your skills to teams that are interested in drafting a player at your position. After the draft, the gameplay loop mostly functions the same. The differences lie in the computer in your room. Madden 06's various ratings relating to player marketability have been simplified into the ego and influence attributes. Ego is a measure of your player's personality, which is determined by how you answer in interviews. A positive ego means you're a team player, while a negative ego rating means you're a diva and a selfish player. Influence is earned by playing well in games. The kind of ego you have and the amount of influence you have determines what kind of endorsements you can get. You can also unlock roles. Roles allow you to temporarily upgrade attributes during a game. Everyone starts with the rookie role that allows you to upgrade your player's stamina and toughness. Getting more influence unlocks more points for you to upgrade with as the game progresses. As you progress through your career, you will unlock more roles that suit your position and playstyle. The in-game camera is now zoomed in on your player, restricting your field of view to better simulate actually being on the field. But Superstar Mode still has the issue of requiring you to play normally when your player is not on the field. Say my player is a quarterback. I still need to play defense as normal rather than letting the game sim the parts of the game where I'm not on the field. Lastly, your website now has a page keeping track of your career milestones that you need to accomplish to qualify for the Hall of Fame. Madden 07 is my favorite Madden game because it does an excellent job at refining the series. The new ball carrier moves are much better to use than previous games, and combined with the lead blocking controls, they give you a lot more control over the rushing game. The changes to both Franchise and Superstar make the mode significantly more engaging as well. It's just a great overall package. Madden 08 marks the end of an era. By this time, EA started to focus more on the next-gen games, and Madden 08 would be the last game ever released on the GameCube. So how did the Madden games on the 6th-gen consoles go out? First, let's look at the gameplay improvements. Madden 08 primarily focused on improving the AI and introducing the Read and React system. Read and React was an improvement on the Playmaker feature. Prior to the snap, you can press a button and see icons on key players and determine their skills and abilities based on the icon. This provided players with the ability to make adjustments in order to find mismatches based on those players' abilities. The hit stick was also expanded upon. Now you can use the hit stick to make high and low tackles. High tackles are great for trying to force fumbles, while low hits are best for cutting out the legs of bigger running backs. The player roles from Madden 07 were replaced with player weapons. Player weapons are roles given to players that will allow them to stand out and play far better than typical players. Admittedly, I don't really notice that much of a difference, but that's probably due to me playing the GameCube version rather than the next-gen version on the Xbox 360 and PS3. Madden 08 added a few new modes. The first and most simple was Ring of a Champion. This was essentially a menu that tracked various milestones and achievements throughout the main game modes of Madden 08. By completing these challenges and milestones, you can earn diamonds for the ring. Another addition was Skill Drills. Skill Drills was a new take on the minicamp drills. Now you had 4 different drills with 3 different difficulties. The running challenge is pretty straightforward. You run down the field in a zigzag pattern while using the ball carrier moves to avoid the dummies. The passing drill has you reading coverage while being aware of the pass rush. The defense drill has you using various tackling options to chase and bring down the ball carrier. The last drill is for pre-play adjustments. The drill has you making a set of pre-play audibles and hot routes to help familiarize you with how the pre-play system works. The last main addition to Madden 08 was the Fantasy Challenge mode. In Fantasy Challenge, you have the choice of playing with an existing NFL roster, doing a 15-round draft with all 32 NFL teams, or hand-picking a team including Hall of Fame players. Your roster can change game to game, with teams negotiating with unprotected players on your roster. You can also negotiate with players on other teams and get them to join your team by paying them more roster points. You can also earn skill points by winning games that can be used to upgrade your players. In between games, you can be challenged by other teams to compete in minicamp drills for players and roster points. The mode consists of short seasons and can progress up to 4 leagues of increasing difficulty. The last league, the Supreme League, is made up of strong teams that can unlock and play now by beating them. Franchise only gets a few changes. For one, the Tony Bruno show is gone, and the newspapers are now relegated to the stats and info section. The main addition is Coach's Corner. There you can change your audibles, customize your hot routes and formation packages, adjust your substitutions, and update your team philosophy. You can also turn on auto assist for various components of the mode, so you don't have to manually sign players or have owner's mode if you don't want to engage in those features. Lastly, Superstar mode now allows you to play as one of the rookies drafted in the 07 draft class. For example, you can play out the career of Adrian Peterson. The other change is that you now have the CPU control your team whenever your player is not out on the field. The only problem I have with this is that the game doesn't sim up to when you're out on the field again, and you have to watch the CPU play the game while you watch from the sidelines. The reason I say that Madden 04 through 08 were a golden age for the series is because of the depth and detail in its game modes. The franchise mode in these games are brilliant, and offer some of the most engaging experiences across all sports games. A combination of team and stadium customization, in-depth control over coaching and ownership responsibilities, and great aesthetic decisions like the Tony Bruno show put these franchise modes above the more recent iterations. I could best sum it up by saying that these games have a soul. I can feel the passion that went into making them as I play. While the gameplay isn't as mechanically deep as the new Maddens, it's still good enough to complement the rest of the game modes. Also, I can say that I've never really raged at the gameplay of these older Maddens. Sure, it may be janky compared to the gameplay of today's games, but I've never felt cheated whenever I got punished for a mistake. That is something I definitely cannot say about some of the more recent games, but we'll get to that in due time. So when I initially came up with the outline for this video, I wanted to talk about the Madden games on the Wii that I grew up playing with, but I decided to review the PS3 version of Madden 09 through 11, since it would make more sense with the overall structure and narrative of the video. Well, as I do not own a PS3 or Xbox 360 copy of Madden 09, and the emulator I have cannot properly emulate the game, we'll have to settle with the original plan for this section. I will discuss the Wii Madden games, and we'll return to the main version of Madden games with Madden 10 in the next section. While there were Madden games released on the Wii prior to 09, I never really started playing Madden on the Wii until 09, and I have no desire to emulate any of the games before it. Madden 09 functions very similarly to Madden 08 on the GameCube. The franchise and superstar modes are practically copy and paste, even more so than what you'd expect from this series. The real changes with Madden 09 on the Wii are the gameplay and control differences. Because the Wiimote and Nunchuk utilize motion controls, these Wii games mapped a lot of the controls to be motion based. This is fine when you're actually playing on the Wii with the proper controllers, but emulating this game is a complete pain in the with an Xbox controller. For starters, the Wiimote and Nunchuk both have independent motion controls, but I can only choose to simulate one of those motion controls to the right stick of my controller. I chose to simulate the Wiimote's controls so I could actually kick the ball and use most of the other mechanics in the game. But this means any mechanics that used the Nunchuk motion controls can't be used, so jukes and stiff arms are impossible. We're off to a great start already, and before anyone familiar with the Dolphin emulator gets on my butt about how I can properly emulate the Wii controllers, I'm not going to go through the hassle to do all that for a brief review of 3 Madden games on the Wii that I consider mid at best. Whoops, I'm getting ahead of myself. If you couldn't tell from the footage, the Maddens on the Wii lean more into the casual audience and attempt to simplify the game. EA's All Play is basically marketing language for making the controls for their sports games on the Wii as simple as possible using the motion controls. A lot of mechanics like the kicking meter have been changed from timed button presses to a simple flick of the Wiimote. With the proper hardware, it really is a simple control scheme. Another feature is creating custom routes prior to the snap using the Wiimote to point and click to create custom routes. Another addition is celebrations after key plays. Shaking the controls during the celebration will earn that player a ratings boost. 09 also added casual modes like 5v5 and party mode. 5v5 is a simplified version of football. Think of the yard in Madden 21, just a decade prior. Your play calling is reduced to 4 plays on both ends of the ball. Party mode allows you to compete with 3 other players in 5v5, minigames, and trivia. Madden 09 is alright, but it's effectively just Madden 08 with motion controls. Madden 10 is one of the most bare-bones experiences I've ever played. Firstly, franchise and superstar are gone. Instead, there's Road to the Super Bowl. This is basically a season mode, where you can choose to play half a season, a full season, or just the playoffs. Madden Showdown is a mode where you play with unique rules. As for gameplay changes, spotlight moments will occasionally happen, where the game slows down and you must make a decision that affects the outcome of the play. I don't care for this mechanic at all. I would much prefer these moments to happen in real time. Slowing the game down like this only cheapens the moment. The other big change is point and pass. Now you can simply pass by pointing at the screen and pressing the pass button. This is actually a pretty cool feature that takes full advantage of the Wii's unique motion controls. It makes for a pretty laid-back experience where you don't have to pay attention to the icons for each receiver. You probably noticed it already, but Madden 10 features a new graphical style as well. Because the Wii did not make a step up in hardware capability like the PS3 and Xbox 360, the devs decided to change the visuals rather than keep using the GameCube era graphics. Now the game uses a more cartoonish aesthetic. Honestly, I can best compare it to the look of the backyard sports games that were coming out around the same time. Madden 10 just doesn't have enough content to really warrant playing for very long. Gameplay can only do so much without a mode like Franchise to motivate players to keep going as they develop their teams. Madden 11 addresses this dilemma by reintroducing Franchise. The mode is different from what we've seen so far. Franchise now has a campus that serves as the menu. Many of the staple features of Franchise are here, but the big difference is the advisors. You are given yearly expectations from 3 advisors. These advisors focus on team success, fan support, and finances. You need to meet at least 2 of these expectations a year, fail to meet 2 in back-to-back years, and you'll be fired. Yes, you can actually get a game over in this Franchise mode. Aside from the new Franchise mode, Madden 11 on the Wii adds nothing, except you can now wear practice uniforms in the 5v5 mode. Yay I guess? The Wii games are okay. They lack many of the features that make the GameCube era games so beloved, and lack the newer gen improvements that their PS3 and 360 counterparts were getting. For families and kids, they're perfectly fine games. But for someone like me, who even as a kid was getting really deep into Madden, they never really did that much for me. They now are nothing but collectibles to me, collecting dust, much like the Game Boy Madden 04 and PC Madden 03 I own. Like I said previously, I didn't play Madden 10 on release. The first time I played this game was for this video. At first glance, Madden 10 is a huge step up in terms of visuals from the games we've covered so far. The games open up with a brief presentation showing the fans in the stadium, then transitions to showing key players and coaches' stats. Now would be a good time to go over the gameplay changes in Madden 10. One of the big new features was the Pro Tack engine, which allowed for game tackles involving up to 9 different players. Quarterbacks now had their own distinct styles and throwing motions. Player fatigue was added to better simulate how players may be taken out for a couple of plays to recover. For example, if your running back made a long run, they would be taken out for a bit to rest up and recover stamina. Defensive backs also received better cut animations so they could play the ball better. Madden 10 also introduced a fight for the fumble minigame. You have to mash the button being shown to win the fumble. It's an okay idea, but I prefer that fumbles have a clear winner outright, rather than leaving it to some little minigame. Franchise looks a lot different, and it has a few nice additions. Now you can view NFL records and historic records against your team's rivals. The main addition is The Extra Point, a show hosted by Fran Charles and Alex Flanagan, who recap the previous week, show who won league awards for the previous week, and gives a preview for the games of that week. Scouting now occurs throughout the season. You can select up to 18 players to scout a week, and scouting players multiple times will reveal more of their scouting report. Owner's Mode now sits in the postseason, where you can only make staff and stadium changes. No more changing the concession or ticket prices. You can also run online franchise modes with your friends and compete against each other. Superstar mode is a lot more bare bones than previous games. You take an IQ test, and then you get drafted. That's it. You don't hire an agent, participate in interviews, or do any private workouts. Your gameplay loop for Superstar is just one day of practice, then playing a game on repeat. It's not particularly interesting and lacks any depth. Not that the previous versions of the mode were that deep either. The only praise I'll give it is that I like the camera angle. It's at just the right angle, not too far in, and not the default camera for regular gameplay. Madden 10 was the game that introduced Ultimate Team, but I will not be going into that mode until later in the video, so don't worry, we'll get to it eventually. While its modes are only alright, the visual improvements and gameplay additions from the games I've looked at so far are noteworthy, and this momentum would continue for a couple more years. Madden 11 delivers a handful of gameplay changes, most importantly a new animation system. GameFlow gives you 3 choices for a play, according to a predetermined game plan. Now you can simply select the play without having to go through the whole playbook. It's basically a new implementation of the Ask Madden feature from older games. Madden 11 also features deeper playbooks, customizable player moves, and a new commentary team. The big change in franchise is that now you can play a total of 30 seasons. Beyond that, there aren't any significant changes I found. Superstar mode is the same as far as I can tell. I honestly don't have much to talk about this game. Perhaps it's because I've never played it prior to making this video, but there just aren't really a lot of changes I can tell from Madden 10 to Madden 11 when it comes to the game modes. Madden 12 was the first Madden I played on the Xbox 360, and was a huge upgrade from the Wii games I played at the time. Compared to those earlier games on the same hardware, however, it's not nearly as drastic. Madden 12 focuses primarily on gameplay and presentation improvements. One of the highlight features was a new collision system. This led to more physics-based interactions between players and more unique tackles. New defensive coverages were added to buff the passing defense, some more after the changes were added to Madden 10 and 11. Madden 12 also features an auto sprint feature. I'm assuming that this was added since a lot of casual players probably just hold the sprint button down most of the time. I used to do that myself as a kid, but I prefer it to be off. Fortunately, you can turn it off, although it's rather annoying that it's on by default. The gameplay overall feels janky, especially compared to some other games that I have and will talk about. One of the most notable changes with Madden 12 is the presentation. Before every game as the broadcast starts, you get to see the unique runout for every NFL team. For example, the Rams mascot Rampage would do a backflip, and someone would ride out on a horse for the Broncos. Stadium lighting was now dynamic, and would subtly change over the course of a game, unless you were in a dome, of course. Franchise mode is basically the same, except for a change in free agency and the loss of the extra point show. Madden 12 introduced free agent bidding. This was a mechanic where you entered a bidding war with other teams for a short period of time. Teams were bidding and signing players at the same time as you, and you need to be aware of which players you want to target in all of the chaos. It's a pretty interesting mechanic, but it just doesn't do it for me. I like to be methodical with free agency and carefully consider which players I want to go after. Being caught up in a bidding war, where you have to manage several bids at once, is a bit much for my liking, and doesn't really add anything to the overall experience. Aside from the changes I talked about, Madden 12 is just more of the same that 10 and 11 offered. These games are not bad by any means, and are solid games overall, but I just don't really care for them compared to the older games I've already talked about and some of the newer games I'll get to later. They sit in this weird space between the great Madden games and the outright terrible ones. There just isn't a whole lot for me to say since they're basically carrying on many of the features of older games while adding small changes here and there. Oh god, here we go. Madden 13 is the worst Madden game. Now, depending on what you look for in a Madden game, you either completely agree with me, or you think I'm crazy. Surely there's a game that's worse than Madden 13. So, let me break it down and explain. Madden 13's gameplay is not the issue, and is a decent upgrade from 12. 13 adds the Infinity Engine, which creates unique tackles since the collisions are now physics-based. This is a much appreciated change, even though you will see animations play out in tackles from time to time. The unique collisions add a nice amount of variety to the gameplay. The new engine makes every play feel unique, and you're not nearly as likely to see the same tackle animation like past games. The only problem with the engine is the players falling over each other after a play. The physics were clearly not refined, but a good start toward more physics-based gameplay in the future. Another good change is with the presentation. Jim Nantz and Phil Simms are the commentary team now, and the game attempts to mimic a real broadcast you'd see on CBS, with all the added camera angles and animations. The in-game sound was overhauled with improved player vocals, crowd noise, and collision sounds. Unique player celebrations were added for some of the NFL's most prominent players at the time. And that is all there is good to say about Madden 13. You may be thinking, well, the gameplay and presentation is better than the last few Madden games, how can it be the worst Madden game ever? Well, it's quite simple really. Everything outside the gameplay and presentation is terrible. You see, Madden 13 was meant to be a reboot of the series, so all the game modes were reworked with the future in mind. The biggest change is Connected Careers, which combined the franchise and superstar game modes of the past Maddens into a single mode. In Connected Careers, you can choose to either be a player, which is effectively superstar mode, or a coach, which is effectively franchise. Playing as a player is even more bare bones than the former superstar mode. You don't get to sign an agent or go through the draft process. You just create a player, pick a team, and that's it. From there, it's just doing practice in a game every week. If you wanted a franchise experience, you had to create a coach. Connected Careers removed many of the cool features that existed in older franchise modes. Owners mode? Gone. Relocate a team, rename, or build a new stadium? Gone. Coordinators and coaching trees? Gone. Pro Bowl? Gone. Private workouts for rookies? Gone. Scouting combine? Gone. Player roles? Gone. So many bells and whistles that were in franchise mode are all gone now. What's replaced these features? A bizarre social media feed and legacy score? Legacy score is basically a high score that you track over the course of a league. In an online franchise, you could compete with other players to earn the highest legacy score. Now, on paper that sounds pretty cool, but it comes at the expense of having a proper franchise mode. The mode is so bare bones now that the team column in player stats is gone, You can't even tell what teams a player has played on over the course of their career without memorizing it yourself. Fun fact, EA didn't add that team column back until Madden 21, but we'll get to that later. All franchise is now in Madden 13 is playing through a season, drafting and re-signing players, and doing that over and over. Where's the soul? Where's the innovation? Where are those fan favorite features like Owner's Mode? EA decided to throw out all the good work they've done with franchise in the past decade, and for what? To have a seamless mode that removes any soul from Superstar and franchise and combines them so players can compete for temporary high scores in an online league? Give me a break. Outside of connected careers, EA also removed Create a Team, a fan favorite mode. Why was it removed? Well, people have said for years that the feature was removed per the NFL's request. That's not true. Rex Dixon, the creative director of Madden when 13 was released, confirmed that it was EA's decision, not the NFL's. The NFL has actually mandated a few changes to Madden games, such as the removal of helmets flying off, concussions as injuries, and dynamic attendance. But the Create a Team is not one of those requests. EA basically removed a fan favorite feature as a part of their series reboot, and are just too lazy to add it back in the 10 games that have come out since. EA also removed EA Tracks, all those good songs that would fill the dead air while playing the game. Well, now it's been replaced with some generic instrumental music. Not even those classic NFL film songs you may know, but just generic tracks. Where is the soul in this game? I don't say that Madden 13 is the worst Madden game because of its gameplay, or even its lackluster game modes. The reason Madden 13 is the worst Madden game is because of the effect it's had on every game in the series that has been released since then. Since 13, EA has been slowly rebuilding franchise and superstar modes from this awful foundation. It's taken EA a decade to get franchise back to a decent spot again, but there's still so much work to be done to get back to those glory days of 04 through 08. Who was the moron who suggested completely upending the Hallmark game mode and turning it into one of the most shallow game modes in any sports game? The Madden series could be in a much better place today if it wasn't for the decision to transition franchise and superstar into connected careers. When a game like Madden 03 has a deeper franchise mode and more game modes than a game that came out a decade later, you have seriously screwed up in designing and developing your game.
You serious?
Madden 13 left the series in a dire place. While the damage done didn't quite register a decade ago, it's now clear that the decisions made in its development left the future of the series in a deep hole to crawl out of. Madden 25 is one of the many small steps out of that hole, and is a much better game than 13. Firstly, the Infinity engine was upgraded to have better physics and to prevent those awkward moments after plays where players would trip over each other. In terms of gameplay, the new ball carrier moves were added. Now you have access to precision moves. Precision moves have greater lateral movement and allow you to shake multiple defenders with a single move, at the cost of speed and a higher fumble risk. 25 also improved O-line blocking. Offensive linemen had improved logic in creating holes and lead blocking. 25 also added the Skill Trainers mode, which provides a place for players to familiarize themselves with the new ball carrier moves and other mechanics already in prior games. The main addition to 25 is the return of Owner's Mode. I only talked about the features removed from franchise with 13, so I'll go over the mode in more detail here. Franchise is now structured around a more streamlined menu. The tasks you need to do for the week are all listed in a simple list. Each week, you can run a practice which earns XP for your players. Practice offers some game scenarios of varying difficulty. The harder the challenge, the bigger the XP reward. Scouting occurs throughout the season, and you get a certain amount of scouting points every week. You can use these points to reveal a letter grade of any of the attributes for a rookie. This includes their scheme fit and personality rating, which matters in terms of marketing and selling jerseys. You can also manually progress players using the XP they've earned. Using XP, you can upgrade a player's attributes or traits by one level. These are the basic tasks you will do outside of the games themselves, except for the new Owner's Mode features. Owner's Mode makes a return and most of the features from the previous versions are here. The goal of Owner's Mode here is to optimize your finances, marketing, staff, and stadium to make as much money as possible so you have more money to pour into funding a better team. The finances section is where you can set the prices of merchandise, tickets, and concessions. These are pretty much the same as before, except there's more items for concessions and merchandise. Your most marketable players now have their individual jerseys sold. This ties into their personality rating. The higher the personality rating, the more jerseys are sold and the more revenue you get. Concessions are split into 5 different classes. The levels that can be sold depend on the concession tier in your stadium. Another neat aspect is that you can sell local foods in your stadium. Using the St. Louis Rams as an example, you can sell St. Louis style ribs and toasted ravioli in your stadium. The marketing section is where you can see your most popular players and media relations. Media relations depends on how you answer interview questions, with each answer having a different boost or nerf associated with it. Team marketing is also dependent on the market your team plays in. The bigger the market, the more money you make. The stadium section is where you can upgrade or rebuild your stadium, or you can elect to relocate. Upgrading your stadium involves either upgrading a certain component of your stadium or renovating it. These components are seating, bathrooms, concessions, parking, and the team store. Upgrading increases the tier and provides a small rating boost, while renovating boosts the rating for a specific component to 99, the max rating. Relocation involves selecting one of the available cities. After that, you get to choose to either keep your team's existing branding or select one of the 3 options each city has. Each option has a popularity percentage associated with it. It is best to choose the most popular option if you want to maximize your revenue. For this example, I'll be relocating to Los Angeles, choosing the Aftershocks branding. After selecting a brand, you get 3 options for uniforms to choose from. Once you choose a uniform, it's time to pick a stadium. 25 offers 5 pre-built stadiums to choose from. There is no customization here. You have 10 choices, 5 basic tier stadiums and 5 deluxe stadiums. The difference is that the basic stadiums all have their components start at tier 1 for lower construction and maintenance cost, while the deluxe stadiums components start at tier 4. I always choose a deluxe stadium. There is no real reason to build a basic stadium, so half the options are pointless. Stadium sponsorships are still missing sadly, so any new stadium you build will just be called insert team name here, stadium, or field. The fan happiness section is where you can review fan reception to your team. This is important to track as happier fans lead to more ticket, merchandise, and concessions sold, which means more money. The staff section is where you manage your coach, scout, and trainer. Here you can upgrade your coach to have certain positions gain XP boosts, gain more interest from free agents, and reduce the chance of a player at a certain position retiring. Scouts can give a discount on specific ratings, and trainers determine how much players regress after a serious injury. The team success section tracks how well your team has played over the last 5 seasons. The more successful your team is, the more money you make. Most of Owner's Mode is back, and it's a much appreciated return. As for the rest of franchise, it's still really lacking, and a lot of work still needs to be done. For the rest of 25, the presentation is still the same as 13. Oh my god.
What the is this piece of shit?
What the actual is the stadium model? First off, the stadium does not curve around the field like this. It's a straight line end to end, not some rounded oval looking thing. Second, the roof is completely wrong. It looks like some bastardized combination of the old Metrodome and Silverdome air pressure roofs. The dome in St. Louis is a fixed steel roof covered in sound dampeners. It's not an inflatable roof. Third, the entire upper bowl is missing. It's been completely lobotomized. That top section where you're seeing in the model is the club level in the actual stadium. How do you screw up so badly that half the seating in the stadium is missing? Finally, the scoreboards are just pasted onto the seating bowl. In the actual stadium, they are built into the facade of the interior bowl. Oh, for f***'s sake. The scoreboards are blocking the view of fans they have up there! Just look at the pictures of the real stadium for comparison. Oh, wait, you don't even have to do that. Y'all have been looking at a proper model of the stadium every game before this one. What the hell was EA doing when making the stadium model? And the interesting thing is that no other stadium has this issue as far as I can tell. It's only the Rams stadium that's so bastardized. How do you go from having a very accurate model in 13 to this? F***ing hell, the model in Madden 03 is more accurate. Maybe there's some sort of explanation. Maybe the modeling team just had to deal with some crunch to meet a deadline, and the Rams stadium was the one model that had to be rushed. Not a bad idea, but it completely goes out the window when you realize that they didn't bother to fix the model in 15 or 16! I know I've harped on this for a bit, and most of you won't care like I do, but the reason I brought this up is because I think it is a perfect example of the lack of attention to detail that plagues the Madden games of the past decade. And believe me, there is more of that to come. Madden 15 is one of the more forgettable games in the series, at least to me, mostly due to the fact that there aren't many changes to the game beyond gameplay. The only significant upgrade for a game mode was for Skills Trainer. The mode now features a lot more drills, including drills that teach players how to beat certain coverages and play concepts. The Gauntlet was also added, which is a series of random drills and boss levels that you must beat to earn a high score. The only other tweaks I noticed for game modes was the fact that you can now sim multiple weeks in franchise. Thank God! In 13 and 25, you had to go week by week, which is just miserable to sit through. Practice was also replaced with Game Prep, where you can assign players to certain drills to earn XP. Coaches had access to many more upgrades as well. Now you can upgrade re-sign influence, trade interest from other teams, and get more scouting points per week. Madden 15's selling point is the changes made to defensive gameplay. There are 3 big changes, the first being a new tackling system. The new tackling system adds 2 new options for tackling. Conservative or breakdown tackles are more likely to bring down the ball carrier at the cost of a few extra yards. Aggressive tackles will stand up the ball carrier at the point of contact, but the tackle is more likely to be broken if you mistime the tackle or you miss the angle. The last style of tackle is the hit stick, which is the same as the previous games. This change makes tackling far more interesting. Before, you'd either simply run into the ball carrier or use the hit stick. Now you have to make quick decisions on how to make a tackle. If I'm trying to bring down a power back, I'd be more successful with aggressive tackles or low hit stick tackles. With more nimble backs, it would be better for me to use conservative tackles so I'm less likely to miss and they're not as likely to break loose. Another change on defense involves the defensive line. Now, pass rush moves are context-sensitive inputs where you either press X for a power move or A for a finesse move. One of these moves are more effective depending on the ratings of the linemen, because you can also drag the line battle to either side to close off running lanes. The last change for defense is the addition of the defensive player lock camera. Now, when you player lock on defense, the camera will move behind the player just like how it is on offense. The only notable change I found in terms of presentation was the addition of actual media that played on the scoreboards in NFL games. Those videos you see playing on the scoreboards, those were the actual videos that played in the real NFL games, at least for the Rams anyways. Madden 15 is not the most standout game in the series, primarily due to the fact that there aren't many easily marketable back-of-the-cover features, but that doesn't diminish the quality of the improvements to defensive gameplay. The tackling system is so good that it's still in the newest Maddens. Madden 16 is one of the better Maddens I've played, and that is owed to the many improvements that 16 delivered. First off, EA Tracks is back. No longer are you stuck listening to the instrumental tracks of the past few games. The soundtrack itself is pretty solid. Skills Trainer got even more drills. Now the mode includes drills that break down passing routes and concepts. Completing the drills in Skills Trainer also earns you packs for the Ultimate Team mode. Speaking of Ultimate Team, Draft Champions is a brand new mode, where you can draft from a pool of available cards in MUT and compete in a series of head-to-head games. 16 also added new gameplay mechanics on both sides of the ball. The biggest and most marketed change was the new catching system. Now you can control whether your receiver would do a possession catch, a rack catch, or an aggressive catch. The situations in which you use these catches are pretty self-explanatory. Possession catches are good for sideline catches, or catches that you care more about securing rather than gaining yards after the catch. Rat catches are for those open crossing routes, or deep open streak and corner routes. Rat catches allow the receiver to turn upfield at the cost of dropping the passive hit. Aggressive catches are for those high passes or passes in coverage. The aggressive catch was notoriously overpowered in 16, and it's honestly the biggest flaw with the system as is. To complement the new receiving mechanics, passing was also upgraded. Before, you could only throw a bullet pass or a lob pass. Now in 16, you could throw a touch pass, which is a nice middle ground between bullet and lob passes. You can also throw high and low passes. High passes worked well with the aggressive catches, and low passes were difficult to stop in combination with the possession catches. On the other end of the ball, defenders now had 3 options when defending a pass: play receiver, swat ball, and play ball. Play receiver would have the defender attack the receiver and attempt to knock the ball out. Swat ball is a more reliable way of defending the pass while the ball was in the air, whereas play ball would be an attempt to intercept the pass. It was a higher risk, higher reward option compared to swats or playing the receiver. 16 also improved the penalty system, improved player head tracking, improved the physics-based tackling, and added defensive quick adjustments. Aside from the OP aggressive catches, the gameplay was pretty solid and a real step up from 15. Franchise also received some updates. A new scouting system was implemented and simplified the entire process. To scout a player, you spend points to reveal the best 3 ratings for any player. The first rating costs 5 points, the second 10, and the third 15. This is the only real flaw with the system, aside from the fact that what you know about a player is 3 ratings, their combine stats, and talent in respect to where they should be drafted. With the most valuable stat only costing 5 points, it's possible to scout too many players and easily determine which players are good based on a single rating. The other change in franchise is the goal system for players. All players get weekly and season goals that reward XP if those goals are met. There are also drive goals that you get every change of possession. One player will get a drive goal and serves as a good way to mix up your strategy on a given drive by encouraging you to focus on your game plan for that drive to meet that goal. For example, let's say you have the goal of running the ball 20 yards to get XP for your running back. You're being encouraged to focus on running the ball for that drive to meet that goal and get the bonus XP. Franchise also has a nice lineup tab that shows the depth chart for your team in one easy to view place. The past few games are alright, to be honest. Gameplay has clearly been the focus of the dev team instead of the game modes, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The gameplay improvements have been good up to this point, and added new mechanics so that players are making inputs at every stage of a play. These new mechanics also give players more control over the outcome of plays, despite the lack of substantial upgrades to franchise, aside from Owner's Mode in 25. Hopefully the upcoming Maddens start to bring some improvements to the game modes. Madden 17 is the last Madden game to be made on the Ignite engine, and is the most complete package of the past few games. 17 features a bunch of new gameplay mechanics. First are the new ball carrier moves. Speed moves have been added and are able to be used while holding the right trigger. So now there are 3 tiers of moves: speed moves, normal moves, and precision moves. On paper this seems like a great addition. The problem with the speed jukes and spins is that for the moves to be effective, defenders must be animated to miss the tackle. This takes control out of the hands of the player on defense, and the player on offense doesn't really earn the broken tackle. If a juke or spin move requires the defender to be animated to miss, then the moves are just bad. I should earn a missed tackle through good timing and finding a good angle to beat the defender. The defender should never have to be animated in such a way to make the move work. 17 also brings back the old style kicking meter. This was part of the addition of field goal and punt blocks. In past Maddens, blocked kicks rarely if ever happened. Personally, I've never seen a blocked field goal or punt in any Madden game prior to 17. Field goal and punt blocks work by giving a player a special animation from time to time that allows them to block the kick. This mechanic suffers the same issues as the new ball carrier moves. Field goal and punt blocks seem to be random, and not something that happens organically. Imagine having to kick a field goal in a clutch situation, and the game just decides that the other player should get a blocking animation for no other reason than just randomness. A change like this takes control out of the player's hands, and leaves the outcomes of games to random luck. A field goal or punt block should occur by exploiting a weakness or overpowering the kicking unit, not by being randomly blessed with an unstoppable animation. Other changes include an improved SWAT mechanic, new trick plays, and updated ball physics. Changes in franchise include the new weekly training system. Now to gain XP, you run a drill from the skills trainer mode for offense and defense. How well you do in the drill determines how much XP is earned. Plus, you never have to run the drill again if you're satisfied with the result. The game will store the result and use it whenever the drill is selected for training again. You also have the option of picking 3 players from your roster to be your focus players and earn even more XP. The amount they earn is determined by their dev trait. Another quality of life improvement in franchise is the new Resign Players menu. This pops up in your to-do list every week and makes it much easier to resign players over the course of the season. The last notable change in 17 is the new commentary team of Brandon Gaudin and Charles Davis. Madden 17 is an alright game, and if I'm being honest, I do prefer it over 16 despite my issues with it. The problem with 17 is that its gameplay changes mark a growing problem of Madden's gameplay being too animation-based. Shaking defenders and blocking kicks should occur through stick skill and proper movement and physics systems, not canned animations that are triggered randomly. Madden 18 marks a big shift in the series, as the games are now made on the Frostbite engine instead of the Ignite engine. EA mandated that all of its games be made using the Frostbite engine, an engine that was built for FPS games. But this had serious consequences for 18 and the future Madden games. A lot of the games going forward would have bugs and glitches due to how unstable Frostbite initially was for a game like Madden. For gameplay, speed moves were adjusted. You no longer have to hold down the right trigger to maintain top speed. Now it functions as an acceleration button, and once you hit top speed, there's no reason to keep holding it down. Now to perform a speed move, you need to tap the right trigger prior to making the move with the right stick to get a speed move. 18 also introduced 3 gameplay styles: Arcade, Sim, and Competitive. Arcade sliders remove fatigue and allow for highlight play animations. These sliders are for players who want to pull off crazy plays and have some fun with the various moves and catches that you may not see in the other sliders. Sim is meant to give an authentic NFL experience. For example, you can get those high contested catches if your receiver has the size and ratings for it. Competitive is for the head-to-head modes of Ultimate Team. As Ultimate Team transformed itself into the esports mode over the years, players demanded that the sliders be adjusted for those game modes. With the competitive sliders, throwing into coverage would almost always be punished, even if you had a bigger receiver. The goal was to remove those moments beyond the player's control, and have the game's outcome be determined solely through stick skill. Target passing was supposed to be the big addition in terms of mechanics. By pressing the left trigger while passing, you can control the location the ball will be passed to. Now, you can have total control over how you lead your receivers. This sounds great on paper, but the execution was terrible. While you are aiming your pass with target passing, you can't move your quarterback, as the target mechanic uses the left stick. Aiming a pass usually takes a second or two at best, so that's a good amount of time in which your QB is a sitting duck. It's just too difficult to use the mechanic compared to the traditional passing mechanics. The benefits are far outweighed by the costs of target passing. Other gameplay improvements include new coaching adjustments, steerable rack catches, new playbooks and formations, and updated lineman animations. Franchise was pretty much untouched this year. The practice squad was added, but I'll be honest, I've never used this mechanic or cared for it. It just doesn't really affect anything. The big addition to Madden 18 is Long Shot, a story mode. Around this time, EA was adding story modes to FIFA and Madden as a response to the growing popularity of NBA 2K's My Career mode. Long Shot is EA's attempt at giving Madden a story mode. So how did it turn out? Well, let's look at the story first. Long Shot stars Devin Wade, a former quarterback at the University of Texas who is attempting to make the NFL with his former teammate and childhood friend, Colt Cruz. After participating in the Combine, Devin gets recruited to be a star in a reality TV show called Long Shot, where he gets 6 weeks to develop into an NFL caliber quarterback. Think MasterChef, but instead of developing into a head chef, the goal is to prove you can play in the NFL. The conclusion of the show has Devin perform in various scenarios as a quarterback to prove his skill. Over the course of the story, the dialogue choices and performance in the various drills and games affect Devin's scouting report, which determines the ending. Making the right choices and succeeding in the challenges earn you the ending where Devin gets drafted in the 7th round. The worst ending is where Colt gets drafted and Devin signs with a team as a free agent. The crux of the story is about Devin overcoming his issues that resulted from a negative experience as a college QB and the death of his dad. His journey through these hang-ups end with him moving on to become an NFL caliber quarterback. I don't have any issue with any of the characters, and I find the story to be perfectly fine for what I expect from a sports game. I think it's silly to expect writing on the level of a JRPG or a big budget game like Red Dead Redemption 2 in a story mode for Madden. The core gameplay of Longshot is a mix of minigames and the typical Madden gameplay. Minigames in Longshot include play call memorization, target passing drills, and football IQ quizzes. I think 2 of these minigames are pretty cool. The play calling and football IQ tests are a good way to teach players some football concepts they may not be familiar with unless they actually play football. Admittedly, I never knew exactly how play calls in the huddle worked prior to playing this game mode. The other minigame is a target passing drill that's like some game you'd play at a carnival. It really doesn't do it for me as the target passing mechanics are already pretty iffy in 18, and now these drills add vertical aiming and the UI just isn't initially clear on how high your pass trajectory is. Overall, Madden 18 is just a total downgrade from previous games. The transition to the Frostbite engine made the gameplay even more janky. The new gameplay mechanics were either underwhelming or just outright terrible. Franchise got no upgrades, and the new Longshot mode, while alright in my opinion, was not well received upon the game's release. Disregarding any changes in MUT that I didn't cover here, 18 is just a total regression for the series. Madden 19 is one of the worst Maddens ever released. I think it's important to state just how bad the game was at launch. The game had tons of bugs. The ball would occasionally be kicked around endlessly in a scramble for a fumble. The spin move was also just stupid OP in this game. I swear, you are just about guaranteed at least one broken tackle by hitting the spin move button. Blocking is terrible. Real player motion was advertised as 19's big addition, and I really just don't feel much of a difference from 18 if I'm being honest. Like, I can tell it's a little different, and I can see that players are playing their feet properly now, but it's not much of a difference in terms of feel. The only other change to gameplay was the addition of new celebration animations. Ooh, interesting! For franchise, again, not a whole lot was added. 19 introduced a new player archetype system, so now upgrades were done by choosing an archetype rather than upgrading individual ratings. So now when you choose to upgrade based on an archetype you want the player to develop, a bunch of ratings relevant to that archetype will be upgraded. Personally, I find this change okay, with one exception. How do I upgrade traits? Oh right, I can't now, so if I draft a player with an undisciplined penalty trait, they're stuck with it unless I decide to manually edit that, even though that completely breaks the immersion of the mode. It's more simple and to the point compared to the previous system, but I understand if some players don't like it. More specialist positions were added to the lineup menu, and the ability to create custom draft classes were added back. Again, 19 was another year of sparse upgrades for franchise. The last thing to talk about really is Longshot Homecoming, the sequel to 18's story mode. Yeah, if you didn't like the mode in 18, you're definitely not going to like this rendition. This year, Colt Cruz functions more as a main character, along with Devin, whereas he was a side character in 18. The story picks up from where the last year left off. Devin and Colt were cut from the teams they got signed to at the end of the story in 18, and Hurricane Harvey has devastated the town of Mathis, with a new stadium needing to be built. The story is split between Devin and Colt. Devin's story has him trying to make the Cowboys in the preseason. After eventually winding up on the Texans, Devin has to fill the role of starting QB after Deshaun Watson gets injured. And that's it, really. Colt has the bigger focus, and is about coming to terms with life's circumstances. His story starts off with him being coerced into watching over his half-sister by his estranged father. Hold up. Isn't this a plot point from FIFA 18? F***ing hell, it is! You're really gonna reuse plot points from your other sports game? EA? Like, come on, really? Whatever. Colt eventually gets a chance to sign with the Dolphins, but elects to turn down the opportunity to coach his hometown high school team after the former coach dies. On top of all this, a local businessman is trying to get a new stadium built in the rival town, and have the Mathis team merge with the rival town's team. Obviously, all of the characters we've been watching don't want that to happen, so now it's a matter of winning enough games and raising enough money to save the team. Eventually you do have to win the game against Beeville, the rival town. The story ends with the fundraiser getting enough money thanks to Deshaun Watson and Antonio Brown. Jesus Christ, could you have picked cameos that aged any more poorly? Anyways, the money is raised and the team is saved. Yay! This is such a downgrade from the previous year for a few reasons. 1. There's no dialogue options and alternate endings. You're just watching a movie with gameplay interrupting from time to time. It's not really engaging to play through. 2. The gameplay itself is not interesting, at least with the previous year. There were many games throughout that tested your football knowledge and made sure you were paying attention. None of that is here now. And finally, 3. The story is just far less interesting. In 18, the story was decent because it was focused on Devin Wade's struggles, and about overcoming those hangups to develop into an NFL quarterback. This year, the story is about being open-minded to different opportunities? Life isn't about football? Like, no shit. Anyone playing this game is probably well aware of that. That's not an interesting plot point or storyline. Oh my goodness. Not to mention that the story focuses on Colt, and he's just not as interesting a character as Devin in the previous year. I don't really care for the struggle of choosing between the NFL and a high school coaching job. I can relate to not meeting people's expectations and having lots of self-doubt, which is what Devin dealt with in 18. Maybe I also don't really care for 19's story because I'm just a cynical when it comes to save the team stories nowadays, given what happened to my local team. Not to mention the story has a quality of some crappy after-school special I'd watch on Disney Channel or something. Madden 19 is just a total L overall. There's nothing else to it really. The little gameplay improvements, the story mode that's even worse than the previous year. The franchise didn't get any significant upgrades. It's just bad. Not to mention the buggy release. It's just bad all around. Madden 20 is a game that sounds good on paper. New game modes, huge updates to gameplay, Pro Bowl is back, but the reality is that 20 continues to suffer from many of the issues that plagued the past couple of games, and has one of the worst metas I've ever seen in a game. Let's break it down. First off, Madden 20 introduced superstar abilities and X Factors. These are a new mechanic that makes the NFL's best players stand out more in Madden. X Factors are abilities that you unlock during a game by achieving a certain goal required to activate the X Factor. For example, to activate Freight Train, a X Factor that allows you to easily break tackles, you must have a certain number of running plays go for 10 plus yards. X Factors for passing, receiving, and defense all have similar requirements relevant to their position. Other X Factors include Bazooka, an ability that allows quarterbacks to throw 15 more yards downfield, and Zone Hawk, an ability that gives more catch knockouts and interceptions for defensive backs in zone coverage. Superstar abilities are permanent and provide better animations for players. For example, there are various route running abilities that give better cuts for receivers for specific route types. Escape Artist is another ability that increases the speed in which a quarterback can sprint out of the pocket. I am rather mixed when it comes to the addition of abilities. On one hand, they do allow the best players in the league to stand out and play more distinctly than the average players. On the other hand is the fact that this adds a whole other gameplay mechanic that has to carefully be balanced, or it can risk ruining the meta of a game. Ideally, superstars would stand out in Madden games by virtue of having better ratings. However, this system is fine, so long as the abilities and X Factors are properly balanced. We'll see later on that EA failed at doing so. Other gameplay improvements include an update to real player motion from last year. When I was talking about 19, I said I didn't really notice the change from 18's movement to 19's. 20's feels better than 19, so it's good to know that the movement is being improved game after game. 20 also added RPOs, a new play call screen, and in-game passing feedback. Now you can tell whether your pass was accurate via feedback, and you can see if your pass was affected by incoming pressure from a defender. 20 also removed pass rush adjustments due to the balancing issues with the mechanic in 19, and defender fakeouts were reduced. Despite all these changes, Madden 20's gameplay was terrible for one reason. The meta was absolutely abhorrent. I'm not going to spend much time explaining why, because I can simply show you a single game of MUT. This is the championship game for MCS in 20. I want you to look at this video and see if you can figure out what the problem is, assuming you didn't know prior to watching this video. See it? The man is using a punter at quarterback. Why, you may ask? Because the run game was way too OP in 20, and it turned out that punters had better handoff animations than quarterbacks. I've heard people say that 20 is a good game, and I can't for the life of me understand how anyone can think that this was a good game when the meta is this bad. Whenever passing the ball is a viable strategy in a game that is meant to simulate NFL football, it is a bad game. I don't care what bells and whistles were added. If the gameplay is bad, the game is bad. Simple. Now it's about time I get around to talking about Ultimate Team. The reason I held off for so long, even though the mode has been in the series for a decade at this point, was because I hadn't really grinded the mode until 20. This is due to a combination of things. For one, I never really got into the mode in 17, 18, or 19. I got teams into the low 80s and then just dropped off. Another factor was the pandemic. With everything shut down, I really didn't have much to do, so I just grinded MUT even though it was March at that point. And that's really what it took for me to get into the mode. For those who may be watching this video and somehow not know, Ultimate Team is a virtual trading card game. Think Yu-Gi-Oh, but instead of collecting actual cards and playing a tabletop game with them, you collect virtual cards of current and historic NFL players and use them to create your own fantasy team to use in Madden. It's honestly a great concept, and it's no wonder why it took off in only a few years after being introduced. So what is in MUT? Well, you have the choice of completing challenges to earn rewards, play solo battles against CPU teams, play head-to-head against other players in seasons, and compete in the weekend league or in draft. Challenges are short missions against CPU teams that you have to complete to earn rewards. These are released as a part of card programs, and you usually have to complete a sizable series of challenges to earn any decent rewards. Solo battles are games against CPU teams, and by beating these teams and getting better scores in these games, you earn points for the week. You'll get coin and card packs based on the amount of points you earn in the mode over the course of a week. Seasons are the head-to-head mode, where you play against other players. By winning 7 regular season games, you make the playoffs and have to win 3 straight games to claim the Super Bowl, which gives you the most rewards. Weekend League is the main competitive mode. You get to play up to 25 games. You earn better rewards by winning more games. The last mode is Draft, which is essentially a mode where you can draft a team from a pool of available players and compete against other players and their drafted teams. It's a good mode to test out cards you may not have. So those are all the ways to use your team, but how do you get better cards? This is primarily done by either grinding challenges and missions, or buying packs in the store. You can also get new cards by completing sets with the cards you currently own. Using cards from certain teams can net you rating bonuses for your players. The same with scheme chems and physical chems. Many players like to run theme teams to get speed bonuses so our players are faster. The overall gameplay loop of MUT is to play the game, to get better rewards, to get better cards, so you can do better in the game, so you can get better rewards, and yada yada yada. It's honestly not bad and can be pretty fun, but I definitely understand why people hate the mode. It's primarily built on microtransactions, and does everything in its power to try and sell you on purchasing packs so you can get that one player you just really want. I would never recommend someone with gambling issues or addictive personalities to play this, especially if you don't have deep pockets. Before I move on to the other game modes, I should mention one more thing about MUT in Madden 20. Remember all the way back when I was talking about Madden 04, and I mentioned Eric Dickerson in this game? Yeah, let me talk about the NFL 100 program real quick. To celebrate the NFL's 100th anniversary, EA released a program of legendary NFL players. There was one catch to these cards though. They all had an X factor that was active at the start of the game. Remember that you need to complete a certain goal to activate a normal X factor. So these cards have these overpowered abilities for free at the beginning of a game. That's already bad, but then throw in the game balance issues I mentioned earlier, and you have a recipe for one of the most obnoxious players in Madden history. NFL 100 Eric Dickerson is the most overpowered card I've ever seen in MUT. This dude has Freight Train, an X factor that pretty much guarantees at least one broken tackle per run, active out the gate in a meta that is nothing but running the football. I think the clips I've been showing speak for themselves. This card was insane, and made an already awful meta even worse. The only addition to franchise this year was the Pro Bowl, which hadn't been in a Madden game since Madden 12. The reason given as to why it took so long for Pro Bowl to be added back was that it was impossible to have all 32 NFL team helmets rendered at the same time until 20. This never made sense to me. For one, the old Maddens used generic conference helmets for the Pro Bowl because the hardware back then couldn't handle rendering all those helmets. What was stopping EA from bringing back the Pro Bowl with generic helmets? Also, the hardware hasn't changed since Madden 25 came out. 20 is still on the Xbox One and PS4 consoles. So it wasn't a hardware issue preventing Pro Bowl from being in the game. They just didn't bother bringing it back until now, and decided to make it a big marketable change to franchise, which it really isn't. The Pro Bowl is a nice feature, but there are far more important things to address with franchise. Madden 20 added 2 brand new modes, Face of the Franchise and Superstar KO. I'm just gonna come right out and say it. I just do not care for Superstar KO, and will not be going over it beyond here. It's basically a bizarre draft mode where you can pick your players, including celebrity players. It's a mode I think that it just has no business being in the game, at least when you consider the state of other modes like Franchise. The other mode 20 added was Face of the Franchise. Face of the Franchise replaces Long Shot as the career mode. It takes a similar approach to the Superstar modes of the past Madden games. You open up the mode looking into a restroom mirror, where you get to customize your player's appearance and voice. After that, it's time to select your college. You get a good amount of choices such as LSU, Clemson, Texas, and USC. The story starts off with a better QB recruit decommitting and choosing to go to the school you selected, taking you out of the starting role. Fast forward 4 years later, and you find yourself filling in for the injured starter, and now have to lead your team to the championship. Prior to your first game, you get to choose your quarterback archetype and answer interview questions according to the personality you want your player to have. After that, it's the semifinals in the national championship. How you perform in these games will affect your draft stock and change some bits of the story. The next phase of the mode has you do interviews with NFL teams, and the answers you give influence your personality. Next, it's on to the Combine, and how well you do in the drills will affect your draft stock. After the Combine is the draft, and depending on how well you performed in the playoffs and the Combine, you will either be drafted early at the event, drafted later on while you're in a hotel room, or you may not even get drafted. Once you get drafted or signed, the story portion ends and it's on to the main gameplay. In Face of the Franchise, conversations with coaches and teammates can result in various bonuses depending on how you answer. You're also given goals every week, where you can earn bonus XP upon completing them. The mode functions pretty much the same as the Superstar mode in the older Madden games. You have a practicing game each week, but instead of endorsements and movie deals, you have conversations with coaches and teammates. The end goal of the mode is to earn enough legacy to enter the Hall of Fame. Face of the Franchise has gotten a fair share of hate since 20, and I don't really get it. I often see people claim that Superstar mode was much better, and I gotta disagree. I think they're pretty even in terms of quality. Face of the Franchise is basically the same mode as the old Superstar mode, just with a story and some college football attached to the beginning. It's basically the same as the beginning parts of NBA 2K My Career Preludes over the past half decade. I don't really care for the mode, as I'm far more interested in Franchise and MUT, but for a first attempt at a new career mode, it gets a pass from me. Madden 20 could have been an alright game, but its gameplay and meta issues hold it back and left a rather bitter taste in my mouth. For Madden 21, I'm going to be looking at the next-gen version. I don't really see the point in talking about the old-gen version when the future of the series is going to be on the next-gen consoles. Madden 21 was at the center of controversy even before its release. Upon the reveal of the franchise changes, or lack thereof, the community had enough and started a mass outcry, and took to social media to complain about the lack of attention being given to franchise over the past few years. In response, EA stated that it would add some new features as a live service for 21, and gave their intentions to bring new scouting, coaching and staff management, and new scenarios for future games. For 21, however, the changes would be minimal. EA added a new playoff bracket visual, the team column for players' career stats returned finally, a better retirement UI was added, new playoff and Super Bowl presentation was added, and fine-tuning progression and AI decisions for team management were also added. EA would go on to add yearly recaps where season award winners and the Super Bowl winners are displayed and saved from each season, and these trace back all the way back to Super Bowl I, and every season since then. Gameplay gets a handful of changes, the most significant one being the changes to player movement. While the gameplay as a whole is still very animation-centric, the next-gen player movement does a much better job at replicating realistic moves, cuts, and jukes. No longer can you accelerate from 0 to 100 in a matter of a second, and the effectiveness of ball carrier moves have been reduced by the movement changes. The fastest players in the NFL stand out even more now with these changes. Wide receivers don't make hard cuts on crossing and post routes now. The change in direction on a lot of routes are now more gradual and realistic to the NFL. The only real gripe I have with the new movement is that I think it went too far in the opposite direction of previous games. Acceleration and change of direction feel just a bit too slow. Another gameplay change was the new pass rush controls. Now, pass rush moves are done using the right stick, and players have a certain amount of points to use for pass rush moves. I definitely prefer this to the previous system of just hitting X or A for power or finesse moves respectively. The right stick offers much more control over which moves I use on the D-line. The last couple of changes in gameplay I'll go into are the new play calling menu and the addition of crowd celebrations. The new play calling UI was odd at first, but I've gotten used to it over the past couple years and it's really not bad compared to the old UI. 21 marks a pretty nice upgrade in terms of presentation. A lot of the visuals you see over the course of the game were redone and are a step up from the past few games. Now, players who were on the sidelines actually had their player names on their jerseys, like they were the actual player models. Next-gen stats were a new way to track and display various stats all over the course of the game. The camera would occasionally pan to fans in the crowd to show their reaction to the game. The presentation in 21 overall is more dynamic, and does a better job of creating an immersive experience. Face of the franchise got some upgrades in 21 as well. A new story has you starting in high school, where you're recruited to play as a backup quarterback. You eventually get your chance to start when Tommy, the starting QB, misses some games to deal with a heart condition. Following high school, you find yourself competing with your rival for the QB spot. In the following season, the coach elects to have Tommy be the quarterback, leaving you to decide whether you enter the draft or play another year of college at running back or wide receiver. After the completion of your senior year in college, you now move on to the draft process. Prior to doing anything in the combine, you're given the choice of reverting to a quarterback or keeping the position you played in your senior year. The combine now has the 40-yard dash, but don't get too excited. It's just a quick time event, and not like the drill from years ago. After that, the combine and draft is just like last year's mode. The mode still retains the structure of the last game. How you perform on the field in high school and college will affect your draft stock, while your interview answers and dialogue choices affect your player's personality. Once you're in the NFL, you really begin to see the updates they made to the mode. Conversations are even better, and have greater influence on events throughout the season. You get to choose a mentor, and since I got drafted by the Saints, I chose Alvin Kamara. The biggest addition to Face of the franchise this year was the NFL storylines. Over the course of your career, certain season-long storylines would occur. Some of these storylines involve being an understudy for a franchise quarterback, others are about leading a dream team to a championship, or having a comeback season after an injury. One thing to know is that you're not playing every single game. The mode will skip to key moments in your career instead. So in this footage, we went from the first preseason game all the way to week 7 where my player had to fill in for an injured Drew Brees. And that's really the gist of the mode. Honestly, it's a lot better than the previous year's mode. The story is better thanks to more interesting characters, expanded high school and college content, and a more streamlined career that focuses on key moments rather than making you slog through several games to even get close to the next phase of your career. The last thing to talk about in Madden 21 is the Yard, the new game mode. The Yard is a 6v6 arcade-style game mode all about pulling off crazy plays. The mode allows you to play against the CPU or other players in different locations, each with their own set of rules. So how do you select your position? Well, that's what prototypes are for. With prototypes, you get to select a position and archetype, as well as choose your abilities and apply skill points, which are earned by playing the game mode. Overall, the Yard just doesn't interest me. I have the same opinion of it as I do of Superstar KO. It's a waste of development time and resources that should be spent on Madden's core game modes. For what it's worth though, it was okay when I played it with some friends when 21 dropped, but you won't catch me playing it anytime soon. Madden 21 as a whole is mid at best. It's certainly better than 18, 19, and 20, but the series as of this game is just nowhere near where it needs to be in terms of quality. Madden 22 is a game I'm very mixed on. On one end, many of the features and improvements that came with this game are great. On the other hand, the gameplay is not that good, but I'll go into more depth in a bit. First, let's look at the gameplay improvements. The big addition for gameplay is the momentum system. Now, home teams have a proper home field advantage, and teams that are losing can recapture momentum and take advantage of the bonuses you get. The bonuses you get from having momentum include reduced fumble chance, endless stamina, and the squiggly lines in the pre-play overlay, just to name a few. Another change was halftime adjustments. Say the person you're playing against runs the ball a lot. Well, now you can make a halftime adjustment to have your defense focus on stopping the run. You can also make similar adjustments on offense. The last really notable change was improved sideline catching. In past Maddens, catches on the sideline had issues of players keeping their feet in bounds and turning upfield. 22 now makes sideline catching mechanics so much better, so receivers do a better job of keeping their feet in bounds and now have a much better chance of turning upfield. Franchise gets some big and much needed changes. The biggest change is the new scouting feature. Last time scouting got an update was back in 17. Now the system had been completely replaced with a new one. The scouting system involves hiring scouts with certain expertises in certain positions to scout certain regions across the country. Once you assign these scouts to a region and position to focus on, they take care of the scouting while you focus on the rest of the mode. This is far less tedious, yet deeper than the previous system. But there's still a few issues. For one, sometimes there are positions that have no available scouts who are experts for those positions. Many times when I was playing franchise, I would have a scout pool that had no experts in scouting outside linebackers, and the scouting pool never changes, so I would have to play that entire franchise without ever being able to properly scout outside linebackers. The other big problem with the system was how ratings were scouted. There was no priority given to certain attributes, so let's say I was scouting a quarterback, and they were 80% scouted, so 80% of their key ratings were revealed as a letter grade. Well, which attributes got scouted were completely random, so even though that quarterback is 80% scouted, I may know absolutely nothing about his pass accuracy ratings because the game decided that their juke move rating should be scouted first. Another addition to franchise is the new weekly strategy system. Now instead of just running drills to get XP, the new system allows you to alter your game strategy for both offense and defense. You have access to full reports of the opposing team's offensive and defensive ratings, as well as their play call tendencies. This is part of the next-gen stats upgrade from last year that the next-gen consoles offer. You can also manage your player's health by choosing whether to run a full pads practice for higher XP gains and gameplay focus boosts at the cost of higher injury chance and lower fatigue recovery, or a half pads practice for lower rewards but more fatigue recovery and lower injury chance. Yes, players can get injured in practice now, so it's important to choose a balance between prepping for games and maintaining your player's health. The last substantial addition to franchise are coaching trees and coordinators returning. Skills are unlocked by paying for them using staff points, which are earned by meeting game day goals. These skills offer a variety of benefits that include reduced injury recovery time, greater XP gains for players, more favorable contract and trade negotiations, and ratings boost for your players. The only issue with this addition is that the coordinators are generic ones and not the actual coordinators of the NFL. Maybe they'll be added in a future release. Other franchise improvements include coach interviews if you play franchise as a coach, a new UI, and new scenarios. Ultimate Team got a few changes this year as well. A new missions menu made it easier to track your progress in the various missions that become available over the course of the year. MUT levels were replaced with MUT seasons. So now the year was broken down to 4 seasons each, with unique rewards. The only other notable change I care to talk about are the addition of strategy cards and NCATs. Strategy cards replaced physical chems, so now instead of paying train to equip cards with a physical chem, you'd instead equip strategy cards that provide rating bonuses to a specific position on the field. So now you can get speed bonuses to defensive backs at the cost of one of your 4 strategy card slots. NCATs are basically NAT cards that you can't put into sets. These are just cards that you get from challenges and missions that are locked to your binder, and you can't do anything with them aside from quick selling them. I don't understand why this needs to be a thing. NCATs are almost never better than cards you have access to throughout the year, especially if you spend money on packs. The only reason you would ever want an NAT card was so you can throw them into a set. If you can't even do that, why grind for those rewards? Now would be a good time to talk about the game balance. Madden 22's game balance was awful, and it's primarily due to the defense just being terrible this year. A combination of poor zone reactions and containts not working created one of the most offense-centric Maddens since possibly Madden 25 or even Madden 04. Combine the weak defense with unbalanced superstar abilities and you have a nightmare meta in the making. 22 will go down as the year where Escape Artist was completely overpowered, and QB Derrick Henry tormented everyone's defense. The reason that Derrick Henry card is so infamous is thanks to Escape Artist. Because of these issues, I stopped playing MUT after October. A football game riddled with money plays and weak defense just does not appeal to me at all. The meta was easily the worst it's been since 20, and I've already gone over why that game was awful to play. Seeing that I have no interest in the Superstar KO or the yard modes, I guess all that's left is Face of the Franchise. Face of the Franchise this year is a mixed bag for me. The story is just not as good or interesting as last year, and now the way you upgrade your player is similar to prototypes in the yard, rather than how player upgrades work in the franchise mode. The story progression of the mode isn't really that compelling either. Of course, you play in 2 college games, and do some training leading up to the draft. The only real change is the team interviews as part of the Combine. They're basically an expansion of the interviews we saw back in 20s mode. Once you get to the NFL, however, the experience gets much better. Now there are more conversations with players and coaches, more interviews, and voice messages from your agent and brand manager. Players from rival teams will talk about you in interviews. Plus, as far as I can tell, you do play every game in the season now, assuming you're starting and not injured. The mode also features the Rich Eisen show, and OT with KC, shows that function similarly to the Tony Bruno show years ago. Madden 22 makes great strides in bringing new and exciting features to franchise, but it's really hampered by the serious gameplay issues that have been plaguing the series for years now. If EA can fix up the game balance issues while continuing to add good new features and mechanics to its game modes, Madden can really find itself in a good state in a matter of a couple years. By the time this video comes out, Madden 23 will be releasing within the week, and I think it's worth at least talking about some of the changes the next game is bringing. From the looks of it, 23 will primarily be focused on improving the gameplay, which is much needed considering the gameplay in 22. Some of the changes being made include Hit Everything, skill-based passing, and 360 cuts. Hit Everything is the addition of more dynamic tackle animations and mid-air tackles. Over 3,500 new animations were added to improve player interactions, and a new mid-air tackle system allows defenders to do a better job at knocking the ball out and knocking receivers out of bounds. One of the biggest problems with the new movement system in 21 and 22 Next Gen was the fact that players didn't plant their feet well and couldn't easily make hard cuts with the left stick. 360 cuts changes that by giving the ball carrier better control over their movement and the ability to make harder cuts. The addition I'm most excited for is the skill-based passing. Every game I've covered in this video had a mechanic called Total Control Passing, which basically allowed you to lead your pass using the left stick. Now with skill-based passing, you have more control on the location and trajectory of the pass, with the added bonus of visual feedback so you know exactly where you're locating the ball. Total control passing never had any visual feedback, so it always came down to getting a feel for the mechanic without any visual reassurance that the new system offers. Franchise will be getting a new free agency system, and updates to the scouting system that was introduced in 22. The new player motivation system now makes it so you can't just sign any free agent by throwing money at them. Now you have to choose free agents based on whether their motivations align with your team or not. Some players would like to play in big markets or states with no income tax, and are more willing to sign with teams that meet that criteria. Players can also act as mentors, so signing a mentor player will give an XP boost to other players on your team that share the mentor's position. Remember how I said the scouting system in 22 would randomly reveal ratings? Now in 23, ratings are revealed according to how important those ratings are for the player's position. So now when you scout a quarterback, the most relevant ratings for that position, like passing accuracy and throw under pressure, will be revealed before a rating like juke moves. After going through all these games and looking at what worked and what failed, let's break down what I think each mode needs to have for it to be considered good. First, Ultimate Team really only needs good gameplay and good card programs. When the gameplay is bad and the programs are weak, much just isn't any good. That's all it really needs from me, and I seriously doubt anyone who plays MUT as much as me would disagree. I still see people praise Madden 20 somehow, even though its gameplay is some of the worst in the series, but whatever, so be it. It's their opinion, I guess. While I did run through Face of the Franchise for the 3 games it was in, I just don't really care for the mode. I will say I did prefer 21 over 22 when it came to the mode, but that's about it. It's just a meh experience overall. The only game mode that has been in every single game in this video is Franchise, and after looking at all the different iterations for the past 20 years, I believe I can say what the mode should strive for in confidence. Outside of gameplay, Franchise needs to succeed in 4 different areas for me to consider it a great franchise mode. Fortunately, Madden 22 and 23 have already begun to address 2 of them. The scouting system that was introduced in 22 and is being upgraded in 23 is exactly what I want. Being able to hire scouts and assigning them to positions and regions is a great change over the previous versions of scouting we've seen. The best part, in my opinion, is the fact that it's hands-off and still occurs over the course of the season, so I can check in on scouting progress whenever I want. The only change I can suggest is incorporating draft-related storylines. The news feature has been sidelined in recent years and should be overhauled to incorporate the new scouting and free agency systems. Speaking of free agency, I am excited to see how the new player motivations and roles change the off-season portion of Franchise. In future games, I would like to see a return to the morale system from the GameCube and PS2 games. The third part of Franchise is Owner's Mode. Owner's Mode hasn't been touched since 25, and it's pretty ridiculous that one of the best parts of Franchise hasn't changed or been improved in a decade. The financial side of Owner's Mode is perfectly fine, but everything else needs a change. Firstly, it would be nice to craft a yearly marketing push based on some players from your team. Say you draft a player early in the first round, or make a huge off-season signing or trade. It would be cool to have some way to put them at the forefront of your team's marketing to increase your organization's popularity. A system like this already kinda exists with jersey sales. The most popular players sell the most jerseys, so signing a popular player will increase revenue from merchandise sales, but it's pretty limited. And I would bet a lot of people who play Franchise may not even know or care about the feature since it's so hands-off. The other big change I would like to see is in regards to stadiums and team branding. Bring back custom branding and stadiums. We've been stuck with the same preset relocation teams and stadiums for a decade now. Give us options to have some creativity with our team logos and uniforms. At least give us some updated stadium models. Like, they don't even work in the newer games now. There's literally a floating AC unit and disappearing architecture because the stadiums weren't adjusted to account for the new rendering system. Ideally, we could have the ability to create stadiums like MLB The Show, and upload our own logos and create our own uniforms like in NBA 2K. The last part of Franchise that needs to be focused on is team management. This sort of ties into what I mentioned earlier. A morale system would be a good addition and require players to make sure their players are happy, or be forced to make moves to accommodate player demands. Imagine having a scenario like a contract holdout occur. Madden 22 did a good job of upgrading the practice system to include player fatigue and potential injuries. I would also like to see this expanded into training camp, and yes, training camp should make a return. One change I would like in regards to upgrading players is being able to upgrade traits. Ever since 19 when the archetype system was added, we haven't been able to upgrade player traits like years before. It would be nice if I could upgrade a player's penalty trait without doing an immersion-breaking player edit. To summarize, give us team logo and uniform customization, a stadium creator, team and player marketing options, a player morale system, training camp, and redo the social media feed from years ago. Imagine how good a social media feed could be if it included player accounts. Have players talk about events across the league. Have players trash talk rivals leading up to a game. Tie social media into player marketing and player morale systems. There is a lot that can be done, and I hope EA adds features like these in the next few Maddens. So, 20 years down, and probably well over 5,000 hours of Madden played. You may be wondering what I specifically think about the series as a whole at this point. I mean, I've talked about all of these games. Overall, I'd say the Madden series hit its high point in the mid-2000s, with Madden 05 through 08. Franchise had depth that had not been matched since, and the little modes like Minicamp and 2-Minute Drill were great little time wasters. While I don't think they were as good as the previous gen games, the Maddens on the Xbox 360 and PS3 were alright. The graphical and presentation upgrades were nice, and the gameplay brought some neat features like the ProTac engine. Everything went wrong with Madden 13. It's taken a decade for the series to even get close to the quality of those older games. If it wasn't for that setback, half of this video could very well be different. Since then, the dev team has dealt with frequently switching engines, returning old features, while trying to fix gameplay on top of all of that. But I don't think it's all doom and gloom going forward. Based on what I've seen with 22 and 23, it looks like EA is aware and focused on fixing the issues with gameplay and franchise. If I were to summarize how I feel about the future of the series, it would be cautious optimism. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe as I'll be making more Madden videos later on this week. And feel free to comment below what you think of the Madden games, and which games you either like or dislike. If you are looking for more Madden content, I'll be streaming the launch of Madden 23 all week on my Twitch channel, so follow me over there, and I'll be uploading stream highlights, guides, and pack pulling videos here on my channel. Link to my Twitch channel is in the description below.